you do that.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. You will see that I tweaked a little bit the title of this presentation by adding one specific question there. And because it's a question I guess I need to ask you today, where is everyone, right? Because half of you are not here, half of you are following from somewhere. So as you will see, in the past, it was an easy question to answer, but these days it's becoming more and more difficult to answer that question, right? So it could be argued that not everyone who was supposed to be here is here. And I could ask the question in many different ways, depending on the word that we reinforce. It takes a slightly different meaning, right? So I could ask you, is everyone here that should be here? That's one question. And another question is everyone here? Because maybe you have a lot of other people following from somewhere, as is usually the case when you have a system that allows people to follow from elsewhere, right? So let's see. Anyway, in any event, I am very happy to be here, and I feel blessed to be back in San Jose. I lived for about a year and a half in Monterrey with my family back in 2007 and 8. And I used to transit through San Jose very often. It was one of the major airports for us. So I still remember, have fond memories of driving up. It's a beautiful drive. So it's again very, very good to be back in town. I take the opportunity to, of course, thank Joseph Katz, Roger, Ken, and all my hosts, and of course, Igor, who was here for the matchmaking. Igor was the one who got in touch with me and suggested that we do this. So thank you very much, Igor. Very good to be here. Anyway, so a little bit about me. My name is Ewandro Magalhaes. I've been a language industry executive for 26 years, as was said here. And I've served in pretty much every capacity. I've been an interpreter, I've been a proofreader, I have been a reviser, I've been a speechwriter, I have been a translator and interpreter. So it's been a while. And I was also chief interpreter of a United Nations agency for 7 years in Geneva. ITU is the name of the agency, International Telecommunication Union. And that gave me the opportunity to actually get in touch with a project that they were developing in that agency called multilingual remote participation, which is the seed in many ways of what we do currently in the company I'm going to be introducing to you today. So since January of 2017, I've been the Vice President of Marketing and Communications at Kudo. And Kudo you will get to know a bit better as we move along. It's basically a startup that is trying to redefine the ways in which we meet. Now, I'm also a practicing interpreter, so I would be lying if I hid that fact from you, because of course in life you start with something and you move on to something else and you become something else, but you never really let go of your real roots, right? Deep down, in many ways, I still consider myself an interpreter. And I've been around since 1992. I've interpreted for 5 Brazilian presidents, 2 American presidents, a number of world leaders. And I promised myself I wouldn't drop any names because I don't want to make a fool of myself. But then again, interpreters have this broken sense of self in that we only get to be someone by indicating someone else, usually higher or brighter, that we worked for. So instead of the names, I'll show you some pictures. And you can tell from the pictures that I've been hanging out with the wrong crowd for a long time, right? At least one of these guys is already in jail, by the way. So don't come too close. Anyway, very good. So you might have heard this quote attributed to Woody Allen, that 80% of success is just showing up, right? And in the past, it was really what it was, right? Because for most of our history, all the way through Middle Ages and the Renaissance and so on, up until maybe 200 years ago, showing up was synonym with being there, right? But that is actually changing. And the fact that you were there, well, in the past, the fact that you were there physically meant that you were really there. You either were there physically or you weren't, right? So the question, where is everyone, was easy enough to answer back in the day, but not anymore. At any given time, another 50 people could join us from anywhere in the world, and they wouldn't actually be here, and they would still be, quote unquote, here, in the sense that they can see everything that's happening, they can vote, they can participate, they can, depending on the technology that you provide, they can pretty much act as if they were in the room, right? So, and I want to, of course, acknowledge also the colleagues who are joining us online for today's program, right? Now, this is changing fast. And of course, whenever that changes, it is the result of technology. And we don't see it as such when we talk about smoke signs, when we talk about writing, when we talk about paper, the moving types, press. But this is all technology, right? And it goes all the way up to radio and TV and so on. And the more it develops, the farther away we are from actually being there, right? You can now make yourself heard not being in the room. You can make yourself heard through a book. You can make yourself heard on TV. You can be anywhere and still be there, right? So this is pretty much the timeline of communication, if you will, and how it's changing the process, right? Then you fast forward to, what, 1990s or so, and you have the wonder we now call the internet, which means that we're now ubiquitous, right? You can be anywhere, and indeed we are all over the place, right? And if you're not anywhere particularly, you can pretend to be there. You can send pictures that you took a month ago and pretend that you're still around and so on, and nobody really knows and can tell really one from the other, right? And also with as little as a smartphone and decent connectivity, you can now see people, hear what they have to say, sell goods to people, deliver goods to people, and you don't have to show up, and they don't have to show up. So it's easy enough to do with the technology the way it is. So I don't really have, I think, to prove to you that technology is redefining how and where we meet. I think we all can agree on that. We've all have tried the many different services we see on screen. And on top of that, of course, Adobe Connect. I would be remiss not to mention Adobe Connect. And we all know that they all work really well. They do a very good job of connecting us, helping us collaborate and so on. And we are pretty much fans of these services and companies. They do a very good job, but only as far as we all speak the same language. And this is where I start to bring this discussion a bit closer to home, to those of us here who are linguists, and I think most of you are. If not, you are experts in language in one way or another. So, as you know just too well, there are approximately 7,000 languages in use in the world today. In the US alone, 65 million Americans use a language other than English. And that number tends to increase as the flow of migrants, depending on how the flow of migrants get into or out of one particular country, and the geopolitics will play a role, but eventually the number of languages any country speaks tends to change and particularly increase as times go by. Now, if you stop and think for a second, the whole notion of being there is not just geographic, because if you attend a meeting and you don't understand what's going on and you have no clue what people are saying and you can't really make anything with that, you could as well just be on Mars for all you care, right? It's like you're never there. So being there also takes the ability to understand and being understood. If that is not in place, you're not really there. And this is the problem and the issue that we're trying to tackle with the technology that we're bringing to the market. Now, you could argue that, well, then again, there's always interpretation, right? As long as you have trained interpreters and you have some conferencing equipment of the sort you see at the UN and the sort that you see at the major conferences like the one I was just now attending in San Diego and so on, People can speak whatever language they want, and everybody can, get along, and you will understand anything I say if I start speaking Portuguese, and an interpreter will get that across to you in English, or Korean, or Japanese, or Chinese, or whatever, right? So it works beautifully, as we all know, and I should be proud that it does, because I made a living out of this for many years. And it does indeed work, but only as long as we are all in the same room, right? So if we're all here and we have interpreters here and the equipment covers this room, we're good, right? But that's not usually the case. By the way, if you have the time later and you want to know a bit more about interpreting, those of you who are not interpreters, you may want to check this TED lesson that I did some time ago. It's been viewed almost 1 million times now. And it does a fairly good job of telling people how interpreters work. So it starts with the incident where a famous Russian interpreter told a block of Western ambassadors, "We will bury you." Some of you will remember that. And that got everybody up in arms because it was a Cold War and so on. And it brings you all the way to a hypothetical situation where aliens are trying to invade the Earth and interpreters come and save the day. So sign me up, right? So it's a very interesting animation. It's a funny one. So it's a process that we did in collaboration with the TED company. It's a very interesting thing. You have the link there, and you can check it out later. Okay, let me go back here before I reveal my ice cream. Just to say this. So again, we now have a new technology, as it turns out, that allows you to go beyond the room. And that allows you to actually get people here. If they're not here, they can participate as if they were, and in a way that makes sense to you if you don't speak English or any of the mainstream languages. So you can actually get people to be there, make themselves understood, and so on, right? You have it in many different ways, in many different flavors. The ingredients are more or less the same, but they are combined in many different ways. So you're going to hear about different names. You're going to have it be called over-the-phone interpreting, which is a form of remote interpreting, video remote interpreting, remote simultaneous interpretation. What else? There are other variations to the name cloud-based interpretation, which is how we prefer to call it, and so on. So basically, the promise now is that you can chime in from where you are. You can speak whatever language you want, and we will help you make sense, right, of what you're trying to say. Anyway, so the company I represent, Kudo, is one of the platforms that is trying to make that happen. That's actually making that happen. We don't try to call ourselves a remote interpretation platform because what we do is not limited to remote. You could actually have everybody in the room, and indeed we prefer to have it that way. The ideal situation is when you have everybody here, interpreters are here, languages are being used, but you now can stream the content of the meeting to people who couldn't make it here because of the traffic, like today, or for whatever reason, and they can follow in many different languages as if they were in the room. So this covers some of the applications, and you will see that the applications are not different from the applications you would be treating with the conventional systems. So you can use it for an all-hands meeting. So let's say you have a multinational company or a company as big as Adobe, where you have people speaking different languages. You can gather all of them through a collaboration system, which is pretty much like Adobe in nature, but with the advantage that you now have a language selector. So I can speak whatever language I want, and I can listen in any language I want. And it's seamless, it doesn't stop, it doesn't take an interpreter on 2 different lines, the microphone hanging here and another landline here, so it's not messy, it's not patchy. It's an elegant solution that allows you to do what you have to do with a lot more efficiency. The same can be said of product launches. So if you have a product that you want to launch in a different country, and you want to also do it in many different languages, or if you have a webinar, or if you're interviewing candidates for whatever position you have, and half of the candidates or the panel members don't happen to speak one single language, you can actually combine it in such a way to, through the use of a system like ours, have it be, not patchy, not messy, and make it more elegant and time effective. Now, these are some of the use cases. So we've talked about the applications, and I'm trying to now give you an idea of what would be a situation that would merit consideration for the use of a system like a cloud-based system or a remote interpretation system or a remote participation system, right? So I have 5 examples here. I'm not going to cover all of them. Some of them are self-explanatory. The ones I want to talk about particularly are, for example, underserved locations. So let's say you want to do an IMUG meeting like this in Odessa, Ukraine. And you have a speaker who, instead of speaking Ukrainian, is going to speak Spanish. Now, it's easy enough to find someone to render that back into Ukrainian or Russian, but depending on the languages you bring to the mix that you include, you're not going to find enough interpreters in Odessa to do the job within the same compound, in the same room, and so on. So in those circumstances, it is interesting to use a solution like this so you can have whatever situation is set up you can afford to pay for and get in the room. And for the languages you don't have, you conference that person in, and the interpreter for that particular language is now working out of his studio or out of a Kudo studio or from home, depending on the circumstances. And you complement your setup, right? So we haven't reached the moon yet, but we're hopeful that NASA, which has already used our services, may eventually at least use Kudo for transmission from the International Space Station. Who knows, right? Anyway, another situation is decentralized meetings. That's the situation I mentioned with all hands meetings. So it's basically being in a Skype meeting, in a Skype call or a Zoom call, where you have a language selector button, so you don't have to struggle with the language anymore. It's seamless, and it's easy, and it's unobtrusive, and it's a very elegant solution. Another situation is the one in blue here, remote participation, which is how it started for me back in ITU, meaning everybody is in the room that should be there, or most of the people are in the room, but there's one particular delegate who missed a flight or who couldn't be there for any other reason. It would be akin to the situation of our colleagues who couldn't be here today because of a traffic jam or because of a situation. If this were being done through Kudo, they could be sitting in traffic right now and getting everything I'm saying with my image and my languages and having this interpreted into many different languages from a moving vehicle. They could actually be listening to it, and they could be looking at it if they're not driving, and they could be participating in it. We've had situations of meetings in New York City where people were late because of flight delays. And one of the participants was very happy that she could follow the meeting, the first part of the meeting, from the tarmac. Because when the plane starts taxiing and it can't go back to the gate, and now you realize you're in line for another 2 hours. And basically she was in line for 45 minutes waiting to take off. She still enjoyed some decent connectivity on the 3G phone she had, and she was able to follow most of the meetings. So it was an interesting situation. So basically remote participation is to allow people who couldn't make it to the venue to be there. Another situation is having everyone here and then having the interpreters be somewhere, which is something that's increasing in popularity now because we're setting up studios that make it really easy for the interpreters to walk in and work as if they are walking into a booth. So they can go to one of these hubs, and from there they can service meetings anywhere. So if this were a multilingual meeting, you could be sitting here using your cell phones as a receiver for interpretation. You could have video or no video. In this case, you wouldn't need the video because I'm standing in front of you. But you could choose the language, and it's seamless quality. Audio quality is amazing, and it's just like having checked out an infrared receiver at the door. So these are some of the typical cases. Now let me tell you a little bit about the technicalities behind it, right? So we're looking under the hood now. The setup is simple. So basically, I would be standing here. If this is being used for a conference, I'd be standing here, and in front of me, I would have this computer like I do with my webcam. It's as simple as that. the webcam would get my image. With a microphone, I would feed it, whatever audio system is available, I would feed it into this computer, and this computer would send it all up to the cloud. From the cloud, it gets distributed to any mobile device or computer anywhere in the world. Unless you have some firewall in your company that would prevent you from accessing a specific website, this should allow you to follow from no matter where. So the interpreters, if this is being interpreted, could be in the room where I am, or they could be elsewhere. This is irrelevant. But they are also getting the same feed as you are, and they re-upload their rendering into whatever language they're working in, and they, re-upload the audio back to the cloud, and from there it gets distributed again. So you now have a situation where coming to your phone is not just the original source, but actually multiple streams of audio and one stream of video, and you can choose from what audio you now want to pair up with that image. As easy as that. So on your phone, you can go from Arabic to Chinese, back to Portuguese at any point, and it's seamless as if you were sitting here with the receiver in your hands. So this is the basic setup. You could be following from a computer, you could be following from a cell phone, you could be in a huddle room with a lot of people getting the sound from the PA and looking at a big screen. If there's one person who needs a different language, that person pulls out the cell phone, for example. Another busy diagram just to show that this could be integrated also with a traditional system. So if this is a large conference where you would rather have the infrared receivers, you can do that, and you can still stream the languages for people who are outside. And those in the room can use whatever system. Those outside would rely on a system that's cloud-based. So I won't bother you with the details of how the connections are made, but it's simple enough to do. So basically, the cloud-based solutions now offer the promise of allowing you to meet anytime. So basically, we're doing this actually now. I've been in meetings at 5 a.m. in the morning. Not that you want to do it, but you can. So meaning your day extends to a point where there's no limit. If you have enough business and if you have enough customers, and depending on where they are, you could be working nonstop, so careful. So it allows you to meet anytime, anywhere, and from anywhere, basically, and anyhow. And I like to stress the word anyhow, because anyhow is what gives you the notion that you don't have to set up a Cisco telepresence studio here and another one here and invest $500,000 for it to happen. With as little as a computer or a cell phone or whatever, anywhere you are, with decent connectivity, you can have a meeting running in minutes. It could be a disaster relief situation where it's not safe to send an interpreter or an expert to, say, Haiti because of the situation. And as long as you have a computer and decent connectivity, you can have a feed from the ground in Haiti and have a meeting going in minutes where you can get experts to share their opinion and provide advice and share best practices on what to do and how to evacuate people and so on and so forth. So anyhow is an important thing because it's all off the shelf. You don't have to invest vast amounts of money for it to have. It's all based on things that you would find out there. So we're pushing a legacy system to the cloud in a way by making everything that happens in a situation where you have multilingual meetings and interpreters and so on to the cloud. By the way, the name of our company, Kudo, is an Albanian word that means exactly that, anywhere, anywhere and everywhere, basically. So this is what it looks on our system, right? And there are other systems out there. We have a few other companies who are providing similar solutions. Not everyone does exactly the same things. Not every system offers exactly the same features. We are, of course, very proud of ours. We think it's a very comprehensive solution. And also because it combines maybe 50 years of combined experience in terms of web conferencing expertise and interpretation knowledge. So I represent the interpretation arm with the knowledge and baggage that I have with the life I had in managing interpreters and teaching interpreters and so on. And our CEO is also the CEO of another two companies, one that sells equipment Every piece of equipment you find in the UN has been sold by the other company, and also leases equipment. So this is someone who's been out there, who understands the need for good audio, who understands the failure is not an option, who understands that this is really has what it takes for an interpreter to do a stellar job. So we're very proud of being, as we say, business insiders, which we think is gives us a great edge to what we do. So this is how the system looks if you're looking at it from a computer. So it's basically like a huge video screen, and you would be seeing whoever is active on the mic now. It could be a room like this, or it could be one person from Toronto, it could be one person in Hong Kong. Whoever speaks becomes big on the screen. And you see the person up close. And it's funny because people, when they speak, they all of a sudden see themselves and they freak out. Like, can I eliminate this? I don't like looking at myself. But it's a feature that we have there for the interpreters, because the interpreter needs to look at the person up close to see the lip syncing and so on. And on the lower left corner, you simply have a button where you can choose the language. It's as simple as that. You click there, you can go to floor, or you can choose whatever language is there. You can also on the side here do many things. You can share your screen, you can chat, you can participate in polls and surveys, and you can share documents. So you can upload documents in advance for people, or during the meeting for people to follow along, and like the agenda or speech or whatever. And there's a way for you to upload documents, just for interpreters. So if somebody brings a speech that is not supposed to be leaked to the public too soon, but the interpreters need it to prepare, you can upload it just for the interpreters, and then in time you can share it with the rest of the crowd. At any point you can go to live video, but you can also see the presentation. If you go to presentation, which would be under this tab here, you actually see the slides that are being shown and the thumbnail, a little thumbnail of the video window. So basically you see both. You see the speaker and you see the slides. And this is pretty much how it looks in different situations. You now have a glimpse of how it looks on the cell phone. Every feature you have on the big screen for the computer, you have on the cell phone as well. So meaning votes, documents, chat, everything you want to do. You can participate, you can do Q&A. It's easy and simple to do. And lo and behold, everybody is now here, right? We're not unhappy anymore that people got stuck in traffic. They can still be with us, right? So that's some consolation, at least if you're talking to a room where people couldn't be there, at least you know that they are connecting from somewhere. Some key features, again, I mentioned a few, but just to go to those I haven't mentioned yet. So video and audio are of very high quality. But there's a trick. Audio is of the essence for the interpreters and for people following from afar. Video is good to have. It's not a must-have. Although interpreters will argue otherwise, right? That you need and you must have a video. We provide both, but if your conditions, network conditions start to flicker and deteriorate, audio will take precedence. There's a system called audio fallback, where if the network is weak for a second or two or three, the video will get a bit unstable. It can even freeze for a tenth of a second, but audio will remain strong. There's a bunch of security aspects that we're going to cover in a minute, and there is also archiving. Archiving means after a meeting like this, you could have access to the video in whatever language. So you can see this in English, you can see this in Spanish, you can see this and you can distribute it through YouTube or within the platform. There are many ways to control access as well. So there are many ways of doing it. Mind you, everything I'm saying here goes for Kudo as well as it goes for other platforms as well. Not everyone has the same features, but pretty much we're going more or less in the same direction, right? So we're basically creating a subcategory. It's not on-site conferencing hardware equipment in a room, and it's not all totally web-based collaboration platform. You still have human interpreters sitting somewhere providing the interface and providing the language talent, but it's all being pushed to the cloud. So you now have a mixed situation where you can have some people in the room or not have people in the room. So we're pushing to the cloud everything you could do in a collaboration platform, such as the ones listed here, Adobe Connect, WebEx, Skype, the GoToMeeting, and so on. plus the missing link of language, which is again an important part of being there, right? Some technology aspects. So every time you talk about cloud-based communication, latency is a challenge, right? And it varies according to how strong your network is. It will vary according to your computer even. It will vary according to a number of variables. What we've done, what we managed to do in Kudo was to bring latency down to something that's quite acceptable. It's between 100 and 800 milliseconds between the origin and the time it takes for you to get it. Most importantly, when you do get it, you get audio and video together. Video doesn't get there first, and then there's this decalage where it's funny and you can't really work with it if you are an interpreter. So the lip syncing is usually very, very good. It's perfect in 100% of the cases, I would say. But it might take you a little bit for you to actually get the signal, depending on your circumstances. Now, when we say that, people say, well, but if you're doing this in many languages, and if you're listening to a different language, if you're doing this in English and I'm speaking English, you're not using the system. You're looking at me and you getting me naturally here. If you're following in Spanish, an interpreter will introduce a latency that's 10 times bigger. Just because, just for the time it takes me to find a better rendering and make it sound good and so on. So it's totally irrelevant. So you don't have to worry about that. That said, we continue to work in reducing that latency to the extent that we can. Audio fallback, I've already covered. Security provisions, I'm not the expert to cover all of that, but thank God, because I'm a lucky guy, the expert is here. So one of my colleagues is here. He's actually the chief engineer in Kudo. His name is Parham Akavan. He's trying to look the other way, but that's the guy. So if you have questions having to do with these technicalities in the end, he's the person to see. But I can tell you that we went out of our way to actually make sure that there are two ways of feeling safe in a system like ours. Number one, we want to control access. We want to be able to actually restrict access to meetings that are confidential only to people who are supposed to be there, right? And of course, you also want to add the convenience of allowing people to join if the meeting is public without having to leave a bunch of documents at the door and declaring who they are and leaving their phone number and so on. So we have both systems, right? But there are ways for you to control who is going where. And every piece of information that would be personally identifiable is also out of reach even for us. So I can't go into the system and see what kind of information you entered in the system. The only thing I can do is reset your password, but I can't even see what your password is. I can reset, and you can do it yourself. If it comes to it, we can reset it for you, but your information is safe. It's not being sold anywhere. It's not being looked by anybody. So it's kept there for the sake of allowing the system to use it, but it's encrypted and it's kept safe. And other than that, you have encryption, 128 key encryption on everything that goes through Kudo: voice, messages, polls, documents, images, everything. We're now at a time where we are creating, where we're becoming compliant, because every client you go to, they have their own specificities when it comes to security, and they want you to be compliant with this mechanism and that mechanism. So we're spending a lot of time and resources into that now. This is where we find ourselves. So we understand that security is a big issue and we have to be on top of it. Now, for those of you who are interpreters, I wanted to show you what the interpreter sees. So basically, we're still relying on human interpreters, right? Very often we get the notion, is this AI? It is not. I tend to say it's not yet, but I don't want to be mugged, so you can delete that. Because usually when I'm talking to interpreters, they don't get the notion that one day a machine would be able to do what we do, right? But I see it coming if you're talking about, for example, repetitive training, where the pattern of language is repetitive, where you have a limited semantic universe that you can train a computer to understand and understand well. So it's not going to be used in free speech where anybody can say anything. But for the kinds of webinars where you're supposed to deviate, minimally from what is supposed to be said, I see a day not too far away when computers are going to be used for that as well. But that's not what we're selling. That's not where we're going. We want to create a market for interpreters, and indeed we're doing that. So basically, we rely on human interpreters, trained interpreters like you, to do the job. Basically, the interpreter logs in with a different credential, and this is what they see. The same video window, the same functionalities. They can see the live video or the presentation or both. They have full control over their microphone. They can mute it, they can deactivate it, they can control the volume, they can see whether there's signal on the floor, they can be on the floor, listening to the original. And most importantly, they have those two boxes where they can program the outgoing languages that they plan to use and the incoming languages that they might have to resort to in case someone speaks a language on the floor that they don't understand. So those of you who are interpreters know I'm talking about relay. So if somebody starts to speak, say, Arabic, and I'm in the booth, I don't speak and understand Arabic, so at that point, it doesn't mean anything to me. So I have to come from the floor where I was into a language that I have pre-programmed, in my case, English or Portuguese, and somebody else who understands, another interpreter who understands Arabic, is now doing that interpretation from Arabic to English, and I'm piggybacking on that English, and from that English I go to Portuguese. Make sense? Right, that's the system known as relay. In the UN, anytime somebody speaks Arabic, the English you hear is coming out of the Arabic booth, not from the English booth. Chinese is the same, because nobody else speaks Chinese mostly, or Arabic. So when Arabic is spoken, somebody in the Arabic booth renders that into English, and that English becomes the common language for all other interpreters, and from there, they go into their languages. In Kudo, you can do the same. So you can select down here the languages that you might have to go to if that situation presents itself. But for the most part, you're going to be dealing with the languages that you're going to be using actively. So this is where I would say Portuguese and English. If somebody speaks Portuguese, I'm here and I'm speaking English. If they go the other way and I'm working alone, I switch to another language. This is how it goes. Same functionalities here. I have access to documents. I have everything and so on. If I click here, I get also some short keys that allow me to go where I need to go using just a keyboard. I don't have to use the mouse. And I can basically work from anywhere. Now, we have, for those of you who are interested in knowing a bit more, and those of you who would like to give it a try as an interpreter, in Kudo, we've developed an onboarding system online. So you can go online to this address. I'll make the address available, basically the presentation available later. And you can take this online onboarding at your leisure, and it takes about 2 hours to complete. You can do it over several days. You go there and you get to know everything you need to know to one day work through Kudo if so inclined. So you can go there and learn everything you need to learn. This will make you what we call a Kudo certified interpreter. Although some people take issue with the word certification, we're not really certifying you as an interpreter, just making you proficient in the use of this particular tool. Another thing that the interpreters will, I guess, appreciate is that although technically Kudo can be used by an interpreter who wants to work from home, we don't recommend it. Because this usually, that kind of situation usually leads to a situation where no matter how good a setup you have no control over the neighbor's dog. And it might start barking in the middle of a very important meeting. Or maybe a contractor comes and starts drilling a hole in the wall close to you. So in order to control these things, what we're doing is we're setting up hubs called Kudo Studios. These are some of the places where you already have them. And this is a couple of booths that have been prepared. These are usually LSPs that we partner with. It's open. We're looking for partners, by the way. So you set up 2 booths and you have the best computer, the perfect setup, 2 internet providers, plus a redundant Wi-Fi. You have even a no break in case the electricity goes down. And it holds it up for another 40 minutes until you find a solution. So this is as safe proof as it gets. So if you want to do it properly, you you would be a lot better off working from a studio like this. But of course, you can work from home if your client knows you well enough, and if it's a 20-minute meeting and so on. We're not in the business of imposing those rules on the clients, right? So everybody's free what they do. Professor Olsen, whom some of you know very well, great colleague and good friend, has been to one of our studios and did a video review of it. I invite you to take a look. The other link is a good blog post as well that gives you more information. And for those of you who want to understand how you set it up, how you create an event, how you go about determining what languages are going to be there, how do you set the timings and so on, there's another tutorial that teaches you how to do exactly that. So you can go there and become an operator, which allows you to, again, service meetings from anywhere and allow companies like yours to set it up if you so wish. So what does that all mean? Let me go back to my notes here. So what does it mean? All this paraphernalia, the system, and again, all the effort of reinventing an industry that has already been there for so long and so on. What does it mean to the world, to the economy, to you and me? So should we call off IMUG and from now on we only meet in cyberspace instead? For example, should we never meet in person again? Basically, the question that I hear more often than not is this the end of in-person meetings? Interpreters particularly are freaking out because they think that this is the end of interpreting as they know it, right? If you ask me, all it means is that we can continue to meet. That's the only thing. For me, this is a tool that, if anything, ensures business continuity. The motto in Kudo is keep what works. As long as you have the budget, the personnel, the equipment, the wherewithal to do things the traditional way and have people gather in a nice setting like this, continue to do it like that. It's conducive to a lot more networking. It's good business practice and so on. The difference is now that with the technology being the way it is, you can couple things. You can mix it up and you can have the same experience you're having here while allowing people who couldn't make it to actually be part of the party. Right? So it allows you to continue to meet, to continue to be relevant, regardless of geography, regardless of language. So you basically go beyond a number of constraints that would otherwise be there. Now, it means that on occasion, you're going to save a buck, but it shouldn't be looked at as a saving mechanism. It should be looked at as a system that is in place, again, to take care of the corner cases where you can't solve the situation for whatever reason, be it because you don't have the budget or because you don't have the interpreter or whatever. It's something that allows you it makes it affordable for you to continue to meet. So we're not out to replace anything or anybody. We're trying to expand the market to make it bigger so that more people can find work, more people can meet, and so that companies and businesses and people who up until here have been monolingual in their dealings and they're struggling in English usually, they can now enjoy the comfort of using their own language and moving forward on a different basis. So it also means that if you miss a flight next time, like I did last year when I was supposed to speak in Tokyo, and I showed up feeling very happy at the airport, and only to realize that as a Brazilian, I needed a visa to Japan. I would never imagine, given the quantity of, the sheer size of the Japanese colony in Brazil, I would expect some diplomatic system to be in play. No, I missed my flight. And it was pretty much by miracle that I still made it, but I could very easily not have made it. So for people who miss their flights and so on, they can still go there and they can still be there, right? Now, for language buyers and sellers, this is again very good news. As I said, you can make your services available worldwide. You can compete worldwide. You can be home now and you can do 3 assignments on a day if ethically, as an interpreter, you think that's something you can accommodate. So it's basically a power to do more with less. Only my advice is that you use it very wisely. It's a big power, but it can derail very easily if it's not used correctly, because it can get you on the wrong side of a number of people if you don't market it correctly, if you don't present it correctly. Right? So my conclusions, and then you'll be very happy this is over. Meeting in person is a big part of what makes us human, right? Gathering around the fire is how we got to where we are, is how we share the knowledge we have, is basically what actually is how we evolved, basically, right? Through tales told and heard and so on. So nobody wants, by definition, to take that away from anybody. From generation, this is how we grew. Now, not always is that possible. And in cases where you now have any difficulty in place, like, for example, you will, of course, remember, those of you who are old enough to the volcano that spat ashes in the air. I guess it was in 2010 or so. And for, I guess, 10 days, nobody could travel anywhere, right? And it impacted every industry on the planet for those 10 days. Even the Boston Marathon suffered dearly because of that, because people just couldn't fly. They couldn't be and go anywhere. 100,000 flights were canceled. This is an air shutdown without precedent in history since World War II. So next time it happens, of course, being physically there is the best option whenever you can. But, and again, if you can't, for everything else, there's always the cloud. I hope the cloud is a better one than the one shown here. You don't want to be in that one. But there are, we hope, there is now, we hope, a better kind of cloud that I think you can consider going forward. So thank you very much for your attention. This is what I had for you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so Roger and I have microphones here and text.
Can I move away from this?
You can, yeah. You see yourself on the, just don't go outside that box.
Oh, don't make me look at my bulb patch. No, I don't like that.
I've never been an interpreter, but as a speaker that has used interpreters, I know sometimes if I get excited, I can speak too fast for the interpreter. Do you have a mechanism here for the interpreter to signal a speaker, maybe to slow down, or some other cues that, because the speaker, of course, is not listening to the interpreter.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Thank you very much. It's an interesting system that you find in every hardware console. If you go and look at a Bosch console for interpreters, or a Titan console, or a Televic console, there's a button called slow down. Only it's never been used for the simple reason that speakers will totally ignore it. They will see whatever it is. Sometimes it's a sound, sometimes it's a light, sometimes it's whatever it is. They're too nervous to concentrate on something else. If they're speaking too fast, there's a reason for that. It's like approaching, and I've tried this many times, it's like approaching a speaker and telling them, could you please try not to speak? Oh yeah, no, I'll speak very slowly. And 5 minutes into the talk, if somebody provokes them or whatever the situation is, they start rushing. And again, it doesn't work to reminding them doesn't really work. How it usually works is the interpreter, there are many ways to deal with it. The interpreter can actually, if he or she starts to lag behind, somebody will suggest that they keep the pace down, or the interpreter may at times say things that don't really compromise his reputation, but cues more or less, along the lines of, and a book whose name escaped the interpreter. We hope the speaker will repeat the name of the book, because he was talking too fast, we couldn't get it. Small things like this will give somebody in the audience the cue that, hey, could you please repeat the name of the book, or maybe you could keep it down a little bit. We've tried these things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Having the button, we considered it, because the other We tried to mimic what we have in the consoles, but eventually we realized it wouldn't do any good. So we dropped it. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay. Jim?
Thank you. I've been in many situations where people that I'm talking to at another end of a telephone or even a video conference, and we're speaking the same language, and they still we can't understand each other.
Yeah.
Because we're in a different context.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is there a way to kind of compensate for that to help people understand, hey, no matter how good the translation is, you may not get it because your own environment is just not allowing you to understand it in the same way.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question back. Usually when that happens, how do you handle it? If it's normal conversation, how would you go about trying to fix it?
Sometimes it just wouldn't work. Like when I was working with a computer programmer in India, and we were both speaking English, and we're talking about dealing with Japanese. Mm-hmm. We just couldn't communicate. I had to get somebody to come in and kind of translate what we're talking about.
These are, again, situations you run into communication and that you can, number one, foresee, and number two, really prepare for. What I can say is that Kudo and the other cloud-based platforms, they are in the business of providing the means that allows you to communicate and get interpreters to help you get that across. Ultimately, you might reach a point where even in a set of languages that are supposedly mastered by all in the call, it still gets complicated. The way you fix it is at least having now a situation where you can stop and readdress it and say it in a different way, and with an interpreter that would allow you to, again, get that across. But there are limits to what you can do, as you well pointed out, even in a situation where no language is being used other than the one everybody speaks, right? At least we're trying to provide a common ground as far as technology that allows you to do the same when several languages are in use with certain level of comfort, if you will. I'm getting a little bit of a feedback back to me. Is that okay? Is that normal? If I speak up a little bit, I got a bit of a...
Come up this way. It's when you move. When you come up here, the feedback gets worse.
Oh, I should be here. Okay, I should be stuck there.
Okay, so I would say that, I mean, what you're doing is wonderful and is a great addition to everything else we have. And that's great.
Thank you.
And we
Thank
just
you very
have
much.
to keep in mind that we'll never get it perfect. Sometimes we just have to meet face to face and kind of work through it.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, and again, interpretation is by definition a very imprecise exercise, right? It's the second best, right? Ideally, we should all speak the same language. Unfortunately, we don't, and you have to make do. But the third best is to struggle in a language that's not yours. Because it's a saying that's been out there for a long time, when you speak a foreign language, you say only what you can. When you speak your own language, then you speak your mind and you say what you mean, right? If I'm trying to say this in French, I can go up to a certain way, up to a limit, and then I start struggling for words, right? So I'll stop here because this is as much as I can say in that language, but it leaves you frustrated at not being able to really speak your mind, right? Yeah, but
at the same time, one of the things that many of us who are multilingual appreciate is that we can understand something in a different language. It actually is a different experience of the thing.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not, we don't want to do away with other languages. We want to be able to use all of them and at the same time enjoy the differences, but understand each other.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Here's a thing you can do. You can monitor the Mandarin channel. When it gets complicated, you go back to English, and then you go back to Mandarin. So you can play with it. Yeah, definitely, you can do that. I think Igor has a question here.
What's the protocol when you do an interpretation for the president? Do you keep the notes?
I posted a very specific video on social media about that. I can keep the notes Only if I show you the notes, you won't be able to do anything with it. And if you show me the notes 2 days from now, I won't be able to do anything from it because the notes are just memory aids. They're there. There will be a bunch of arrows pointing this way and that way and whatnot. I will use E for energy, for empowerment, and for elections. It's all context driven. In the heat of the moment, I look at the page and it's all fresh in my mind, and I know exactly what that annotation means. 2 days from now or 40 minutes from now, it doesn't mean anything because I'm already busy preparing the next set of meetings. In the case in point, I know what you're talking about. That same interpreter probably went from that meeting to another meeting, to another meeting, to another meeting. So she left already busy having to prepare a complete different set of terminology and vocabulary for the next meeting and the next one and so on. So I don't see, frankly, I still don't understand why she doesn't come on TV and simply says that I don't recall, and she's not lying. If she comes and tells everyone that I was there, I heard everything, and I don't recall a word of what I heard, I would totally take her to be telling the truth, because I've been in that situation. You're not it's not what we do. You're not taking notes to write a report later. Interpreters are not stenographers, they're not note takers. They're just trying to survive those 20 minutes and do the best job they can. And they're the first one to try and push this out of their mind so they can be fresh for what's coming next. So I hope I've answered your questions. I might keep the notes, but they don't do anything. Here you go.
Ewandro, I've asked this very same question last year when Barry Olson was here, and I think I kind of put him on the spot a bit without intending to do so, but here's the very same question for you. As a practicing interpreter, I find it crucial to have a very high quality incoming audio as an interpreter who from time to time does remote interpreting. How would you define the audio quality of your system in terms of the sampling frequency and the bit rate available for the audio channel bandwidth? Is it sufficient for our ears? Does it mimic what we hear in a live conference room from the live microphone feed?
The technical answer to what you're asking is, does your system cover 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, which is what the human voice uses in all its nuance to actually give you everything you need to get as an interpreter in terms of hesitations, in terms of whether I'm nervous, whether I'm not nervous, and so on. This is not the best spot, so I need to move somewhere else. I'll try here. Here, perhaps. Good. No. Here. Where? The podium. Okay. I'll be here. Okay. Good. One, two. Good. This is an ISO standard that we're coming very close to. And not only are we mindful of it, we're working towards it. Fardad Zabajian, our CEO, is the US expert in the ISO committee for that particular subject in that chapter. And he's helping write the next set of ISO standards that are going to go into the software solutions that you have out there. So if anybody's close to being very compliant to ISO standards, it's Kudo. Now, it's a challenge because it also varies according to your network, right? I can give you the best system. And now, for example, in Kudo, you can actually go and determine what level of video quality you want, what level of frame per second you want in the video, the baud rate, the bit rate, and so on. You can set those things. But if your network is not strong enough, it won't reach that level. So part of it is also working with users to actually use an i7 core or dual core computer that actually does the job correctly. Now, part of it is very important, part of it is very necessary, and part of it is just good to have in luxury, because without the 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, it can still do an excellent job and get an audio that if I don't tell you that it doesn't cover that range, you won't be able to say. All right, so subjectively, I can tell you, having worked many hours in Kudo, that the audio quality that I get in the system to my ears is comparable to anything I've gotten in the 2 weeks I've been working with state-of-the-art equipment in San Diego, for example, I can tell the difference. I can tell the difference is if my headset is not good, if my network is not, holding up and so on, then you can immediately tell the difference. But it's, if anything, I think it's a matter of time for our system and the others to actually come very, to be fully compliant with the audio as you need to have it. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions.
Great.
First of all, it seems to me that I'm sure you have this in your framework that there are two basic. I'm focusing on the user experience, not so much the interpreter experience. That there are two basic environments. One of them which is audio only, and the other one which is video, with of course with audio. I'm not going to focus on the audio only. The interesting stuff happens on when you have a video feed. Mm-hmm. And I would point out, by the way, that even if we're sitting here in the audience with an earplug, it might be advantageous to have a video to look at, and I can explain that when I get to the second.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You probably know that as well. So the first question has to do with the video display. What is accessible there? It seems to me, and I've actually seen a system like this for recorded presentations at Microsoft when you were looking at them after the fact, where you had you could either look at the speaker or at the screen or at both.
Yes.
Okay. I presume that you've anticipated this requirement.
Yes.
So I'll give my list of desiderata. Okay. So that's
sure,
one.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Another one is, okay, in this day and age, if I'm looking at a screen, I'm looking at the slides, the first thing I want to do is put my fingers there and pinch, and I want to focus in on that bullet point on the slide. So that's another interesting requirement. Another interesting requirement would be to, that was interesting, let me go back, even though you're going in real time, let me go back 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and pick it up there so I can listen. Let me go back and slow it down. Okay, got it. Now let me speed up or skip ahead. So this playing with time, now it'd be nice to go forward, can't do that, can't go into the future, but we can do anything we want with the past, right? Mm-hmm. So this ability to play around with the feedback, the playback, in ways that we're used to doing with a lot of video systems today. So that's the first question. What have you thought about those enhanced video playback experience?
We have the two first cases solved. Right? We have the two first cases in the back. First one was remind me here. First one you mentioned was the ability.
Well, it was the first one was either the speaker or the slides.
Okay. So you basically can choose between the slides and the speaker. Now, what is going to be shown when you choose live video is a function of the camera system you have in the room. So if you have a tracking system of cameras in the room where the minute you click on a microphone, the camera comes to you, that's the feed you're going to see. If when the microphones are all idle, it goes back and gets the full view of the room, that's what you get. So if you have a tracking camera system, whatever you can send to the mixer and somebody clears to be shown anywhere goes to the system. It's basically one USB cable that brings whatever is going through the AV control room and that somebody decides should be shown, or a system that automatically takes you to this camera or that camera like I just described. So this is done and you can do it. You can even show a video and then break it and show again the live video. We've done, for example, the World Polio Day for Rotary was a series of presentations interspersed with videos shown from all over the place and so on. And so it all went to the AV room, and from there, a bunch of technicians decide what should be shown and when. Whatever comes is going to be the feed you work with. The ability to do pinching and focus on things and so on is not something you can do currently on Kudo on the screen as the program unfolds with the slide as it is being shown. But you can have the same slide uploaded as a document that you download to your computer. You can open that document and follow along. Then you can go back to whatever page you want. You can zoom in and zoom out and so on. It's not exactly the same experience because I don't have active control over the slide as it's being shown. It's a static image or it's a moving image if it's a video or whatever it is. But at that point, that feed is inaccessible to me. But I can download the same presentation and play with it in a secondary monitor, for example, or if I forget about the presentation, just go to a different window and then I can play with it there. So this is as close as it gets. As far as playing with the playback, it's not yet it's not something yet that we do yet, because on our minds, it's not something you would be able to do when watching a presentation live. So the effort has been so far to mimic a situation where you are as close to being here as possible. So as I'm doing this, you can go back to 10 minutes and 5 minutes and then 10 seconds or whatever. Now, would it be nice to have? Yeah, it's the first time I hear it as a suggestion, and to me, it's a very nice feature to have. So I'm going to have a conversation with Graham tonight to see if this is something we could somehow accommodate. After, of course, judging also to what extent it's really going to be useful for the user. Now, once the video is done, once the archiving is done, then it's a video like any other. Then you can go back as much as you want, and it can go forward as well. So, hope I've answered.
Yeah, just a couple of comments on that. One of them is that if you're just relying on the camera feed, that's one thing. If you can intercept the feed that's going to the screen, you can have some other things. So just one other thought that occurred to me while you were describing that is that I would like a system where I get the side-by-side, the speaker and the slides, and I go backslide, backslide, backslide. Oh, that's what he was talking about. Go and then catch up.
I see.
So you can make those disjoint.
Interesting. Okay.
So anyway, that's the video playback thing. So if you can offer a better experience than people have sitting in the audience, or that's what I was referring to when I said that the video experience of somebody sitting in the audience, they can do all those kinds of things. Then they can say, what was that point? Oh, that's the term he was using. I didn't catch it. So when they ask the question, they can use the exact term that was on the slide. Okay, so that's the video thing.
Now, mind you, the solution I gave you is not the same, but it gets you there. Even on the cell phone, if you want to go back to a specific slide, you can go visualize the document, scroll down to the page you want, and go back immediately to the live video. Yeah. This is possible. It's a workaround, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you
know. I understand what you mean. We don't have the functionality as you stated, no.
And sometimes if you're listening to something in a second language, it helps to slow it down. I don't know if you're aware of this, but on something like YouTube, you can actually slow down. So without changing the range of the thing, just
that's good.
Slow it down, stretch it out, and that helps.
But you can do it on a live though, right?
On a live, but I'm saying if you play with the time, you got some options. Okay, so the second question has to do with the companion technology of closed captioning. So it's great to listen to. I'm sure everybody here who's worked with another language at some point or another has watched a television program or something and turned on the closed captioning so they can understand what's being said. Yep. You either turn it on in the language that's being spoken so that you get the visual as well as the audio, or you turn it on in your language, and you can switch. You can listen to the interpretation, but watch the closed caption in the source, or vice versa. Yeah. You could even, if you wanted to, you could put both of them on the screen. Or if you wanted to, somebody was going from English into Portuguese, and you could say, I think that's a bad Portuguese interpretation. I'm going to stick with the Portuguese, but I'm going to throw up the Spanish closed captioning so I can see how they translated that. And so I really get what's going on. So you have all these options of throwing in, of course, closed captioning is hard in real time, as we all know. Yep. We'll watch the transcript of a basketball game versus the transcript, or the closed captioning on a basketball game versus the closed captioning on a movie, right, when they've had a chance to do a professional job. Yep. But you live within the limitation. It's actually getting pretty good. On your Siri, it's pretty darn good. Yeah. So the closed captioning option, you must have some closed captioning thing either now or in the works. What's your closed captioning answer?
Closed caption so far is something that we can inject in the system on demand. For example, if we're doing a system, a live presentation for a UN organization, they have by mandate to show the closed caption in English, and in English only, because again, everybody is in the room and there's only one screen and they can only choose one language. So they actually have captioners sitting somewhere in the room or all the way in California sometimes. I remember them doing it in Dubai with captioners working from Kansas City. And these are people who are listening to the interpretation through a webcast and doing the captioning as they go. And the captioning is actually being fed back into the system. Now the decalage, the latency was too big if the distance is too big, the latency starts to be a problem. And then by the time the person is finishing a speech, you're still getting the first words of that particular sentence. So now they tend to have the people in the room. This is one of the solutions that we don't have, but if you do have it, we can inject it in the system. It's just another feed that we add to the video. Now, one step ahead is to actually have automatic transcription AI engines that does it for you. We are not there yet. We're not implementing it yet. And again, it's another conversation we should have, Parham, to see how close we are to doing it, how easy or difficult it is. My question is, can we, for example, do it in the many languages that are available? If we do come up with a system that does it automatically, can you go to English and have it be English? Can you go to Spanish and have it be Spanish? Or do you choose the language you want to see? Because you can choose the subtitles in Spanish and have the audio be something else, right? I don't yet, again, we don't have it yet. And it's debatable where we're taking this in the near future. Closed caption in the main language, I think we must very, very soon start to accommodate, either through transcription or in the way we already do. But it's a very good point you raised. Excellent. Thank you very much. These were very good questions, excellent. So I'm walking out of here with a huge wish list for this guy.
What you guys did was give him more work. You happy?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, you know, we often spend the last 20 minutes or so, you know, having one-on-one chats and finishing up the snacks.
Excellent, excellent.
So unless anyone else has burning questions and suggestions, I'd say we should break it up for now. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you very much.